Hey everyone, professional photographer Ian Plant here, and in this episode of Tech Tips, I am going to show you how to effectively use leading lines to make compelling photo compositions. I'm also going to show you a few things to avoid, so if you want to learn more, stay tuned. By the way, these techniques and many more are discussed in length in my new Ultimate Photography Composition course, so you'll definitely want to check that out. It can help you take your photography to new heights. And please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel on YouTube, and ring that bell so you always get notified whenever we drop our next helpful video. Leading lines are a powerful compositional technique, one that I use a lot, especially with my landscape photos. Basically, the idea is to look for things that create, lines, things that go from point A to point B that will lead the viewer deeper into your composition. And it's okay to think of lines a bit broadly. You don't have to use shapes that are perfect lines. It's okay if they're a little curvy or zigzaggy, because those shapes are going to basically accomplish the same goal. And here's where I think most photographers make mistake number one. They see a leading line and they set up right on it, and that line goes directly from their foreground to their background subject. And they end up with this vertical line. And it's okay to use vertical lines. Sometimes I'll use vertical or horizontal leading lines, but more often than not, I prefer to move a little bit left or a little bit right of my line and transform that vertical line into a diagonal line instead. I think you'll find that diagonal leading lines are more interesting than vertical or horizontal ones. So whenever you get a chance, it's a good idea to incorporate diagonal lines into your compositions, like I did with this photo taken in the old city of Fez in Morocco, where I used a patch of light on the ground as my leading line. I moved over to the right, transforming that line into a diagonal line, pointing to the shadowy figure in the background. Even better, look for converging diagonal lines. Wherever you have two or more diagonal lines converging, this is known as a vanishing point in art. Vanishing point was an innovation of the Renaissance, and it's a pretty simple concept. Just imagine that you're standing in the road or looking down a set of railroad tracks. So the sides of the road or the railroad tracks are perfectly parallel, but as you look into the distance, those parallel lines seem to get narrower and narrower. The distance between them shrinks until eventually those lines converge at a point on the horizon where they disappear. And this is known as the vanishing point. So what this does, these converging lines that come together at this point, this creates the illusion of depth and perspective. So when Renaissance artists figured this out, they started to use vanishing points to give their paintings a three-dimensional feel. But Renaissance artists quickly figured out that the vanishing point does more than just create this illusion of perspective. It also focuses the viewer's attention on a single point. So basically, where you have two or more lines converge, that point is going to be a very powerful place within the composition, and it's going to attract the viewer's eye. This makes leading lines and vanishing points powerful compositional tools because they allow the artist to direct the viewer to the most important parts of the visual design. So things quickly switched from artists using vanishing points solely as a perspective technique to the great masters using it artistically to visually captivate the people looking at their paintings. So to get this vanishing point effect when you're working with leading lines, what you want to do is get low and close to those lines and use a wide angle lens. That's going to exaggerate this leaning in effect, and it's going to make the vanishing point more apparent. And this is an exception to what I said earlier when I said that generally you don't want to be right on top of your lines because you'll end up creating a vertical line, which isn't quite as interesting. When you get lower and closer and wider, the edges of the line will stretch out and they will transform into converging diagonal lines, which is much more dynamic. It's usually a good idea to put the lines in the foreground leading to the background, or you can have them coming out of the edges and the corners of the photo. This creates a compelling radial pattern that inexorably leads the viewer's eye into the composition. I use this technique a lot when photographing sandstone canyons, like this sea cave along the shores of Lake Superior, or this slot canyon from the Utah desert. But I also use these converging radial lines for other types of scenes as well, such as with this photo from the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. You can also find these radial lines when you're photographing architectural subjects, such as this old abandoned building being slowly reclaimed by the Namibian desert. And this brings us to the second mistake that a lot of photographers make when they're using leading lines. You want to make sure that your leading lines are actually leading the viewer somewhere important in the composition. So typically you want your leading lines to lead to the main subject. Now, it's okay to break this rule if you otherwise balance the composition. So for example, with this photo I took in Iceland, the lines created by the sand ripples lead to the upper right of the photo, which is empty. But then that cloud comes in from the top, and that creates a line that leads the eye to the mountain on the left. So you got the ripples coming in from the bottom pointing to the right, and then this cloud coming in from the top and pointing to the left, and these two things balance each other out and create a very energetic composition. And even though leading lines are really cool, leading curves and zigzags can be even better. Because a line just takes the most efficient path from point A to point B, while a curve wanders its way between those 2 points, forcing the viewer to explore more of the composition. So for example, for this photo taken in Badlands National Park, I used a curvy line to lead from the foreground to the background. And for this drone photo I took high above the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, I got rid of line altogether, and I used this curvy frozen stream to lead the eye deeper into the scene. So you shouldn't always be using leading lines, but leading lines are an important compositional tool that you should definitely have in your creative kit. They will allow you to make compelling compositions that pull the viewer in and don't let go. To learn more, check out my Ultimate Photography Composition course. With almost 4 hours of video and a 250-page ebook, you're going to learn everything you ever wanted to know about photography composition, plus much, much more. Simply put, this is the best course you will ever find on the topic of composition. And if you really want to learn how to master the art of photography, then you got to check it out. It is worth every penny. Well, that's it for this video, and thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have found it helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Here are a few more great videos that I think you'll enjoy and learn a lot from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get notified by ringing that bell so that you always know when we drop our next helpful video.